Chapter 1. For 7 years, Juliet Hawthorne knew she was a substitute. She knew because every time their passion reached its peak, Ethan Donovan would kiss the single mole beneath her eye over and over again. She also knew that the nickname of the woman she replaced, Luna, was something he whispered in his sleep. She knew, better than anyone, that she was the most perfect replica Ethan had ever crafted. A living tribute, dedicated solely to his deceased first love. She had thought one substitute would be enough for him. But then he began collecting other mementos of his lost love, like a man collecting stamps. That was when her heart finally died. It was time to leave. Ethan was photographed by paparazzi entering a hotel, his arm around Aria Vance, a newly minted A-list starlet. The scandal dominated the entertainment news feeds for a week. Juliet waited a week for him to come home, to explain himself. Even a phone call or a text would have been enough. But there was nothing. From the day the story broke, he never came back home. After the initial storm of anger and helplessness, all that remained was a profound sense of loss. She should have accepted it long ago. She was nothing more than a substitute Ethan had picked up off the street. Even after 11 years together, a fake was still a fake. He could discard her at any moment, shattering the happy illusion she had built for herself. So it was time to leave. Juliet refused to be discarded again. This time, she would be the one to walk away. She returned to the tiny apartment in an old building, the hallway so cluttered with stored belongings that she had to turn sideways to get through. The place felt both familiar and foreign. She hadn't been back since the day she met Ethan Donovan. In the 11 years since, he had offered her houses and cars, of course. But she loved him, and those material things meant nothing to her. Now, she realized this was the only place left where her wounded soul could find refuge. After a quick cleanup, Juliet settled in. For 15 days, she threw herself into her work, her world shrinking to nothing but design blueprints and sketches. But in the dead of night, a pain that stole her breath would sweep through her, a pain so deep it brought her to tears. In the end, she had no one to blame but herself. She knew she was a substitute, yet she had foolishly allowed herself to hope for more. Of course it hurt. "Open the door," Ethan's voice shattered the silence. Juliet jumped, instinctively pulling the hearing aid from her left ear. The metal, still warm from her skin, felt hard in her palm. She froze for a moment, then laughed at herself. She had chosen to leave, to stop loving him, yet old habits remained. She had painstakingly hidden the fact that she was deaf in her left ear for 5 years. If Ethan had known, he would have surely found her flawed, a defective substitute. He might have even thrown her out, even though he was the reason for it. The dilapidated iron door rattled as he kicked it twice. His voice was laced with impatience. "Juliet, what is this disappearing act? You think it's funny making me look for you for 15 days? Get out here." Juliet wiped her tears, forced a smile, and opened the door. "I'm sorry, I don't." Before she could finish, she was pulled into his arms. His scent had always been a source of warmth she'd craved for 7 years. But now, that warmth was tainted with another woman's perfume. Juliet struggled, pushing him away until she met his displeased gaze. "What are you sulking about now?" She knew he never paid attention to her feelings, but she had left the signed divorce papers on the table when she left. And he thought she was just sulking. Juliet took a deep breath. "Did you see the divorce papers on the table? Did you sign them? When are we going to the courthouse?" Ethan's expression turned cold. "Divorce papers?" Chapter 2. A bitter smile touched Juliet's lips. "You must have come home drunk, didn't you?" Ethan had a bad habit. When he was drunk, he would search for Juliet, refusing to settle down until he was by her side. Otherwise, he would wreck everything in sight, causing chaos until he found her. His friends had called her in the middle of the night more than once, begging her to come and rescue them. His face darkened, his lips tightening into a thin line. "So what if I was? Have you forgotten how you begged me to marry you? And now you want a divorce? What do you take me for?" Juliet tilted her head to hear him clearly, then let out a soft laugh. "I thought of myself as the Luna Beaumont in your heart." Ethan's eyes narrowed instantly. "How did you know?" At 16, Juliet's parents died in an accident, leaving her homeless. Ethan found her on the streets and took her in. He gave her clothes, food, and a place to live. He even sent her back to school. She saw him as her savior, and over time, gratitude blossomed into love and dependence. On her 18th birthday, he threw her a lavish coming-of-age party. She had planned to confess her feelings for him that night. But after the ceremony, she couldn't find him anywhere. She eventually overheard him talking to a friend. "Are you going to keep her around forever?" "Well, her eyes, they're just like Luna's." Ethan's voice was soft, but his words landed on Juliet's heart like a ton of bricks. She had heard the part-time housekeeper's gossip about a childhood friend of Ethan's, a girl named Luna Beaumont, who had died tragically. So that was it. He had rescued her only because she had someone else's eyes. That night, he was heavily intoxicated, and Juliet managed to coax more of the story out of him. She learned that Luna was the love of his life. She learned that he had only taken her in because her eyes had stirred a flicker of pity in him. Juliet, Luna. Every night when he whispered a loving nickname that could have been for her, it had always been for the other woman. From that day on, Juliet lived in turmoil. She loved him, but the pain of being a substitute was unbearable. In the end, however, she convinced herself it was enough. The woman he loved was dead. As long as she loved him, what did it matter if she was a substitute? If she could just be a little more like Luna, Ethan would love her a little more. But she never imagined that even that wouldn't be enough to keep him. He had found other substitutes, turning her into a living joke, a clown. "You keep her in your heart, and I once kept the man you used to be in mine," Juliet said, looking him straight in the eye. "But I don't want to be with the man you are now." "I don't want to have these eyes," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, "and still end up being thrown away by you." Ethan couldn't hear her last words. He was furious. His eyes blazed with the same fire she'd seen years ago when he found out she was being bullied by classmates. His company was just starting then, but he had dropped everything to investigate the families of those students, methodically creating trouble for each of them until they came to her door to apologize. Back then, he had said, "I never made you feel like a freeloader. Who are they to act like they own you?" Now, he said, "I've spoiled you rotten. You've lived off my money and in my house for all these years, and now you think you can just walk away? I'll give you two choices. 1, you pay back every penny I've spent on you, and I'll agree to the divorce. 2, you come back with me, behave yourself like you used to, and I won't care how much money you've spent." Chapter 3. Fine. I choose the first option. After Ethan slammed the door and stormed out into the night, Juliet sat motionless until dawn. When morning came, she gathered all the money she had earned from her work and tried to estimate how much he had spent on her over the years. The difference was a staggering sum. Juliet went to his company to find him. Out of habit, she walked toward the private elevator reserved for Ethan, but the receptionist stopped her. She was an old employee who had been there since the company's early days. She smiled warmly at Juliet. "Here to see your brother again? You might have to wait a bit. A starlet just went up. I think the boss is busy right now." In the beginning, when the company was just a startup, Ethan had worked day and night. Juliet would go home from school, eat dinner, and then bring him his meal. To avoid office gossip, Ethan had simply told everyone she was his sister. As the company stabilized and Juliet's studies became more demanding, she stopped visiting. Only now did she realize that in 7 years of marriage, Ethan had never told a soul she was his wife. She sat quietly to the side, watching people hurry past, feeling utterly ridiculous. After what felt like an eternity, the private elevator lit up, and a man and a woman stepped out. Aria Vance clung to Ethan's arm, her face radiant with happiness. Ethan's gaze was soft and focused as he listened to her, murmuring a reply every now and then. They were so lost in their own world that they didn't notice Juliet. As they passed by, Juliet saw a hand-woven bracelet on Aria's wrist. A surge of betrayal, raw and instinctive, erupted before reason could intervene. She strode forward, blocking their path and grabbing Aria's wrist. "Give it back." "Ah, what?" Aria looked flustered. "Give what back? Are you a stalker?" She struggled, trying to hide behind Ethan as Juliet's grip left red marks on her wrist. "What do you think you're doing?" Ethan's hand shot out, clamping down on Juliet's wrist bone. The sharp pain forced her to let go. His eyes burned with anger, as if she were the one bullying Aria. Juliet looked up at him. "Give it back." "That's the bracelet I made for you," Ethan frowned. "All this for a bracelet?" He gestured to Aria, who immediately slipped the bracelet off and held it out to Juliet. "It's just a bracelet. Aria probably saw it on my desk and put it on out of curiosity. Couldn't you have just asked nicely instead of jumping out and scaring people?" "This bracelet." Juliet had obtained the blessed string for it from a remote shrine, climbing over 3,000 steps, one for each prayer, to celebrate his company going public. To others, the endless stairs were a pointless, grueling journey. They couldn't understand such devotion. But to her, every single one of those 3,000 steps was a testament to her love for Ethan. And now, the bracelet, infused with all her love and blessings, was dangled from two of his fingers and tossed back at her as if he were discarding a piece of trash. Ethan turned and wrapped an arm around Arya, pulling her close and patting her back soothingly. "Are you here to pay me back? I can still give you a chance. You can still choose option 2. Arya playfully tapped his chest. Juliet clutched the bracelet and held out a bank card. "This is all the money I have right now. I know it's not enough, but I'll pay you back bit by bit." Ethan looked at the card, a strange smirk playing on his lips. He took the card and pressed it into Arya's hand. "Here, go buy yourself something nice." Chapter 4. Ethan looked at Juliet, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Pay me back bit by bit? How long will that take? I'm not running a charity. Do you have any idea how much interest that money would have earned just sitting in a bank?" "Perhaps," he said, his eyes glinting with an unspoken meaning as he glanced at her, "there are other ways to repay your debt. Just wait. I'll be in touch." He walked past her with his arm around Arya, who was still eyeing Juliet with curiosity. "Who is she? What's she to you?" Ethan laughed heartily. "Isn't it obvious? I'm her creditor." Even as they walked away, Juliet's right ear could still pick up their light-hearted banter. She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing the tears back. She had endured so much heartbreak. This was just one more cut. The man who had once saved her from her creditors had simply become her new one. If it hadn't been for Ethan all those years ago, she might have ended up on the streets, fighting with stray dogs for scraps of food, sleeping under bridges, or worse, sold off by human traffickers. No matter how much he had hurt her, she owed him for allowing her to grow up safely. It was a debt she had to repay, logically and emotionally. But she never imagined that when he contacted her, it would be with such a humiliating offer. Ethan wanted her to work as Arya's personal maid. "Do you really have to humiliate me like this?" Juliet asked, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt as she looked at the coolly indifferent man before her, a storm of pain churning inside. "Humiliate you?" Ethan chuckled. "I gave you a choice, pay me back or continue being my wife. You're the one who chose to pay me back." "Wife." A sharp pain pierced her heart and she laughed weakly. "I'm not that important, I'm just a substitute you kept for 7 years and then threw away." Ethan's face hardened. "Who said you were thrown away? Aren't you the one who ran off and demanded a divorce? And what was I supposed to do? Wave our marriage certificate in everyone's face and announce your affair, or pretend I didn't know and keep loving you?" Ethan fell silent, his face a grim mask as he stared at her. There was a time when she thought she saw love in those eyes. But back then, she was so consumed with the idea that being a substitute was good enough. She couldn't tell if that love was for her or for Luna Beaumont. Now all she saw was impatience and barely suppressed anger. 2 months, Ethan's voice was dangerously low. "I'm giving you 2 months. If you can't pay back the rest of the money, you'll come back home and behave yourself. Don't make me angry again." When Juliet left his office, Arya was waiting outside the door. She was dressed in a pure white gown, her neck adorned with a necklace from a niche brand only the wealthiest and most influential clientele could acquire. Juliet's gaze lingered on it for a moment. Arya noticed her looking and smiled sweetly. "Is it beautiful? Ethan bought it all for me. A gift to celebrate the end of filming for my movie. He's taking me out to dinner now, you know." "It's beautiful," Juliet said, turning her right ear toward her and nodding emotionlessly. "I hope you two have a lovely meal." Perhaps frustrated that she hadn't gotten a rise out of her, Arya huffed and swept into Ethan's office. Through the crack in the door as it closed, Juliet saw Arya laugh and throw herself at Ethan, her eyes filled with the same adoration Juliet herself once had. But Arya didn't know. That dress, that necklace, they were both styles that Luna Beaumont had once loved. Juliet had identical items in her own closet and jewelry box. A substitute is just a substitute. No matter how convincing the copy, it's never the original. And that applied to both her and Arya. Chapter 5. Juliet returned to the house she had shared with Ethan for 11 years. It wasn't out of any lingering attachment. It was for the clothes and jewelry. When she had left, She felt those things were gifts from him, and seeing them would only stir up painful memories, so she had left them all behind. But now, since he was demanding she pay him back and had so easily given identical items to someone else, there was no reason for her to sentimentally cling to them as keepsakes. The moment she pushed open the door, she saw the house was in a state of chaos, clearly thrashed by Ethan in a drunken rage and never cleaned up. It was obvious where he had been staying all this time. The ceramic figurines they had made together were shattered on the floor. The furniture she had carefully arranged was overturned. Even the painting on the wall was destroyed. Back then, he had been too busy to take wedding photos with her, so she had drawn a cartoon version of them in wedding attire to serve as their marriage portrait. Fortunately, the walk-in closet was relatively untouched. Juliet packed up all the dresses and jewelry he had ever given her. As she was finishing, she noticed a box tucked away in the gap beneath the wardrobe. She struggled to pull it out. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, looking as if it had been lost there for years. When she opened the box, she saw a diamond hair ornament glittering with a dazzling light. Juliet's eyes widened. The hushed whispers of onlookers from the day of her parents' accident echoed in her mind. "I think I saw the driver who hit them. It was a beautiful young girl, wearing a really sparkly diamond thing in her hair. Must be rich." Someone's suppressing the news. "You better keep your mouth shut. Her parents had been killed in a hit and run in the alley right outside their home." The area was old and run down, with no security cameras. The driver had fled the scene, and by the time her parents were buried, she still had no idea who was responsible. At the funeral, her legs had gone numb from kneeling. Amidst the cacophony of voices, she had faintly heard those words. She had stumbled over, begging the stranger to show her a photo. On the blurry image, the diamond hair ornament was identical to the one in her hands, and in the information she had gathered over the past 7 years, she knew that Luna Beaumont had been in an accident 11 years ago, and then, suffering from severe depression, had taken her own life. Juliet had never questioned it before. Why, when she was kicked out of her home, had Ethan found her wandering in that very same alley? Why would a wealthy heir like him be anywhere near that dirty, dilapidated part of the city for no reason? Now, clutching the diamond ornament, her hands trembled as she pulled a small note from the box. For Luna, it was Ethan's handwriting. He had gone to that part of town because of Luna. That's why he found her. That's how this twisted, 11-year fate had begun. The world spun. Juliet leaned against the wall, gasping for breath as a wave of nausea washed over her. She couldn't bear the thought. Her entire life with him, their first meeting, it was all built on the bodies of her parents. Juliet felt a chill that pierced her to the bone. She sold all the clothes and jewelry to a second-hand shop, raising a considerable sum. After all, as a substitute for Luna, everything Ethan had given her was of high quality. The shop owner even hinted that Juliet should try to get more gifts from such a generous man, offering to give her a better price next time. Juliet just smiled without a word. Even a shop owner could tell at a glance that these clothes and jewels weren't her style. Yet Ethan, blinded by a pair of eyes, had bought her things Luna would like for 7 years. With the money, Juliet went to the house Ethan had previously given her. She contacted a real estate agent, wanting to sell it as quickly as possible, even if it meant taking a lower price. The agent, seeing how straightforward she was, invited her to a meal. Chapter 6. The nausea that had gripped Juliet since leaving Ethan's house hadn't subsided, but a dull ache had started in her stomach, so she agreed. The agent was a young man, fresh out of college, but he was thoughtful. During the meal, he noticed Juliet barely touched her food, only picking at some pickles, and saw how pale and weak she looked. He grew concerned. "Ma'am, are you feeling unwell? Why don't I take you to the hospital?" Juliet shook her head. "It's nothing, just an upset stomach." The agent insisted, urging her to get it checked out and reminding her to take care of her health. The young man's voice was clear and unhurried, his gentle tone so much like Ethan's when he used to coax her at night. Juliet's mind drifted. She remembered a time when she had felt sick, and Ethan had noticed immediately, canceling all his work to take her to the hospital. Back then, she didn't know she was a substitute. She believed all his kindness came from love. But after she learned the truth, she could see Luna's shadow in every detail of his affection. Looking at the sincere concern on the young man's face, Juliet found herself inexplicably agreeing. All right, I'll go to the hospital. The agent froze for a second, then his eyes lit up. Great, ma'am, just wait for me to finish, I'll be quick. The young man ate with a ravenous hunger, yet he wasn't messy. Watching his fluffy-haired head bent over his food, Juliet thought of Ethan again. Ethan was always meticulous about his image, a result of his upbringing. Even if faced with food he couldn't eat or didn't like, he would eat it without a flicker of expression and then offer praise. She remembered one time his friends had dragged him to a party, and he had called her halfway through to pick him up. When she arrived, she found him hiding on the rooftop, his neck covered in an allergic rash. She had rushed him to the hospital. She had asked him why he ate something he knew he was allergic to. Ethan had said, "Because my appetite was stronger than my body's reaction." Thinking back on it now, she wondered if that was what she meant to Ethan. Like that dish, something he craved, but because she wasn't the real Luna, it ultimately caused him pain. The hospital wasn't far. The agent, cheerful and enthusiastic, helped Juliet register and find her way around. The doctor who saw Juliet was a senior specialist, Dr. Alastair. He asked her detailed questions and then gently took her wrist to check her pulse. "My dear," he said, "you're pregnant." The words struck her like a bolt of lightning. Juliet was so stunned she wondered if her right ear was failing her too. Her dazed and shocked expression told the experienced doctor everything he needed to know. This child was likely not part of this young mother's life plan. Dr. Alastair handed Juliet 2 forms. "Go and discuss it with the father. If you're keeping the baby, you'll need to go to the obstetrics department." Juliet walked out in a daze, holding the forms. The agent came over, glanced at the papers, and understood instantly. He looked at Juliet's face, now even paler than before, and asked cautiously, "Ma'am, should we call the baby's father?" 2 words escaped Juliet's lips instinctively. "No," she collected herself, her lips pressed together as she touched her stomach. Could you come with me to the obstetrics department?" She was completely lost and felt a desperate need for someone to be with her. In 7 years of marriage, it wasn't that Juliet hadn't wanted a child. She had thought that if she had a baby, Ethan might finally see her the mother of his child, not just Luna's substitute. But for 7 years, no child had come, and she had slowly convinced herself to become a living copy of Luna. And now, just as she was trying to sever all ties with Ethan, she was pregnant. Chapter 7. She didn't know what to do. But first, she needed to get the tests done to at least make sure the baby was healthy. Perhaps sensing her turmoil, the young agent took charge of everything, paying the fees, confirming the list of tests, and collecting the results. He supported her as she walked in for the examination and was still in a daze when it was over. It was then that she heard a familiar, booming voice, Juliet Hawthorne. She looked up, bewildered. Ethan stood in the backlit hallway, his shadowed face contorted with unmistakable disgust and rage. He strode toward her and, without warning, swung his hand. The force of the blow struck her hearing aid, sending a deafening screech straight to her brainstem. For 10 seconds, Juliet's mind was a complete blank. Then, the realization hit her. He had slapped her. Her left cheek burned, and the hearing aid in her left ear sizzled with sharp, static noise. She also realized someone had caught her, and that Ethan was standing over them, looking down from on high. "So this is why you suddenly ran away and demanded a divorce," he sneered. "You were cheating on me, weren't you? Carrying some other man's bastard child." His scornful, disgusted expression took her back 5 years. She had taken advantage of a drunken Ethan, using every seductive trick she had secretly learned, and whispered in his ear, "Can you love me a little more than you love Luna?" Ethan had shoved her off the bed. As she lay on the floor, the look in his drunken eyes was the very same one she saw now. He had said, "You're not even worthy of being compared to Luna." The agent held the small, thin frame of Juliet in his arms, the sight of blood trickling from the corner of her mouth, igniting a firestorm of fury within him. "Are you insane? You show up, slander 2 people with 1 sentence, and then you get violent. With an attitude like that, no wonder she's divorcing you. Did you want her to wait around and plan her own funeral?" It had been a long time since anyone had defended her so fiercely. She patted the agent's hand. "It's okay, don't say any more." She stood up, wiped the blood from her lips, and looked at Ethan, who was still glaring at her. "Since you think I've been cheating and am carrying another man's child, then this child will never call you father." Her gaze shifted down the hallway, where Arya Vance was approaching with her own test results. It all clicked into place. In any case, you're about to have a child of your own. Congratulations. After offering her emotionless congratulations, Juliet turned and walked away. Her thin, frail back was resolute and cold, like a leaf that had weathered too many storms. A sharp pain suddenly shot through Ethan's heart, a feeling that he was about to lose something incredibly important. He instinctively reached out to stop her. But Arya threw her arms around him from behind, holding up the test results for him to see. "Ethan, I'm really pregnant. We're having a baby. You're not going to make me go through this without being your wife, are you?" Ethan's eyes followed Juliet's retreating figure and the man hurrying after her. An inexplicable irritation washed over him. I know, Juliet never thought that before she had even finished scraping the money together, Ethan would be the one to call her to the courthouse to finalize the divorce. At the entrance, she saw Arya Vance, dressed in a long gown, wearing sunglasses and a mask. Ethan was carefully supporting her, his face stern as he chided her to be more careful, to stop jumping on him all the time. Arya just giggled and promised she would, so that's why he had let her off the hook so easily. He was clearing the way for the next substitute. The paperwork was processed quickly. There was no communication between Ethan and Juliet. When it came time to sign, Ethan even asked the clerk for a new pen. Finally, when it was all over, Arya handed Juliet a red envelope. "Sister Juliet, if you have time, you should come to my wedding with Ethan as his ex-wife. I would love for you to be there to personally bless our love." Chapter 8. Juliet clutched the invitation, feeling a dull blade saw away at her already ravaged heart. She forced a smile. "I won't be able to make the wedding, but I wish you both happiness." It had taken her 7 years to escape the sweet trap of being a substitute. She couldn't bear to watch someone else take her place and walk right into it. Ethan watched her expression, his temper flaring. The words he spoke were laced with anger. "I'll be much happier than I ever was with you." Juliet was already turning away. The hearing aid Ethan had broken hadn't been repaired yet. She didn't hear him clearly and couldn't be bothered to ask, leaving him with nothing but her retreating back. Arya linked her arm through Ethan's, her heart sinking as she watched the look on his face as he stared after Juliet. After years of navigating the entertainment industry, she knew exactly what it looked like when someone was in love. It was just that Ethan himself hadn't realized it yet. She touched her own stomach, a thoughtful expression on her face. 8 months of pregnancy flew by. Juliet gently patted her belly, singing lullabies to the child she had yet to meet. The entertainment channels were still buzzing about the wedding of the century that had taken place 6 months ago. A global wedding tour, open banquets. It didn't matter if you were a fan of Arya Vance or not. As long as you offered a word of blessing, you could attend the multi-million-dollar feast thrown by Mr. Donovan. Their wedding photos were displayed on massive public screens for a month. Even a 3-year-old could tell you that Arya Vance is the person Ethan Donovan loves most. The first time Juliet saw one of those giant wedding photos during a prenatal checkup, she stood and stared for a long time. She traced the outline of Ethan's face. While drawing their cartoon wedding portrait, she had imagined countless times what he would look like in a real wedding photo. She just never thought she would see it like this. "Jules, I brought freshly roasted chestnuts," a bright, cheerful voice called out, the sweet, nutty aroma wafting in from the doorway. Juliet looked at the newcomer, her expression softening. "Leo, you don't have to come see me so often. You have work to do." "I closed 3 deals today, so I got off early. Came to celebrate with you." Leo Keane quickly washed his hands and handed Juliet a few peeled chestnuts. Ever since Ethan had slapped Juliet, Leo's sense of justice had gone into overdrive. He visited her every few days under the guise of protecting the life and property of his client, and had even helped her find a reputable all-in-one maternity and postpartum care facility. After 8 months of his constant presence, Juliet had come to see the lively and cheerful young man as a younger brother. Occasionally, she would even share her future plans with him. Leo would always prop his chin on his hand and watch her, his eyes, curved like crescent moons, seeing only her. Finally, the due date was near. Juliet got into the car arranged by the facility to go to the hospital. But halfway there, she lost consciousness. When she woke up, she was looking into Arya Vance's eyes. They were both tied with coarse ropes to the edge of a cliff. A wooden board was wedged behind their backs, pressing them against thorns and branches. A single push would send them tumbling down the cliff to their deaths. The rope was cinched so tightly around Arya's bulging stomach that it was misshapen. The ropes on Juliet, however, had been tied to avoid her abdomen. Juliet struggled, but a gentle hand pressed her down. "Jules, don't move, you'll get hurt." She looked up in disbelief. Leo's sunny face was still gentle, but now it held a faint, chilling edge. "He'll be here soon," he said. "Just wait a little longer. I don't want to hurt you." Before he finished speaking, Ethan's figure appeared in the woods. "You bastard, what are you doing?" Chapter 9. Leo stood up, looking at him. "Stay right there, or I'll push them both off." Ethan froze. Before Leo could say another word, Arya burst into hysterical sobs. "Ethan, save me, Juliet and this man. They know each other, they're in on it together, trying to harm us." Leo let out a small laugh. "That's right, I know Jules. But she is not my accomplice. I kidnapped them because of you, Ethan Donovan." Leo pulled out a photograph. "A man of your stature has a short memory, I'm sure. You've probably forgotten how many people died on your construction site 10 years ago. You pushed the schedule relentlessly to meet your deadlines. My father was worked to death, and you suppressed the news, passing it off as an accident. I lost my father, but you're a lucky man, 2 children at once." Leo stood between Juliet and Arya. "I want you to apologize to my father with the price of one of your children. Now, you choose which child gets to live and which one has to die." Juliet couldn't believe that the Leo who had been by her side all these months had approached her with such motives. She stared blankly for a moment, but Arya had already reacted, screaming and begging Ethan to save her. Juliet watched as Ethan's gaze lingered on her for a split second before shifting to Arya, filled with tension and concern. She sighed inwardly. This whole charade was unnecessary. Wasn't it obvious who was going to be abandoned? As expected, Ethan barely hesitated. "I choose Arya." He even managed a small, cruel smile as he turned his eyes to me. "Is this fun for you, setting up this whole drama to get my attention? Do you regret the divorce and think this is the way to win me back?" "Juliet, you're so childish." Ethan sneered. "I've made my choice. Go on, push her. If you're going to put on a show, at least make it convincing." Leo let out a muffled laugh. "Mr. Donovan, you really play favorites, don't you? You believe every word Arya says, but you won't believe that Jules had nothing to do with this." He pulled a stack of papers from his pocket and threw them at Ethan's feet. They were Arya's forged pregnancy reports. "Well, since you've made your choice, let me tell you something. The baby in Arya's belly is completely fake. You have no children." As soon as he said it, he kicked the board under Juliet. The board slid down the slope. Juliet's eyes widened as she watched Ethan's expression shift from disbelief to terror, and then to a primal roar as he lunged toward her. It was only a few seconds, but it felt like watching her entire life flash before her eyes. A roaring filled her ears, and the sensation of falling pulled her toward the cliff face before she was plunged into complete darkness. In the instant before her eyes closed, she thought she felt a single drop of water land on her face. It wasn't raining. Why would there be water? Up on the cliff, Ethan collapsed where Juliet had fallen. He watched helplessly as her figure grew smaller and smaller, plummeting into an abyss he could never reach. He was filled with a blinding rage, but it was too late. He didn't know when the tears had started, but they now streamed down his face, a chain of grief chasing Juliet into the depths. Arya squirmed, calling for Ethan to save her. Leo stood with his arms crossed, watching the scene with a cold smirk. "Don't tell me you regret choosing Arya. If you do, why don't you jump down and join her? Maybe then she'll forgive you." Ethan couldn't hear a word. He just stared blankly down at the abyss, his hand clutching his chest. Strange. Hadn't he always thought of Juliet as a perfect substitute for Luna? Hadn't he already decided to replace her with Arya? Why did it hurt so much? It felt just like the day Luna had died. Chapter 10. By the time he came to his senses, Leo was gone. Arya, exhausted from her squirming, lay on the ground, sighing. The fake stomach, strapped to her front, had shifted during her struggles, revealing the corner of a pillow. Ethan stood over her, his face devoid of expression as he stared at the pillow. He wasn't making any expression at all, but his eyes were as cold as if he were looking at a corpse. Goosebumps erupted all over Arya's skin. Her instinct for danger was sharp, and without a second thought, she began to kowtow and beg for her life. I didn't mean to, I just wanted to be your wife, I just wanted to marry you, I was going to tell you. I swear I just couldn't find the right time, please. Forgive me, I was wrong, I was wrong. Her carefully maintained face slammed against the ground again and again, breaking the skin and embedding tiny grains of sand into the wounds. It was excruciatingly painful, but she didn't dare stop. She knew that if she did, her very life would be in question. Ethan watched her, a self-mocking feeling rising within him. He had lost the woman he had raised for 11 years. For this? Pathetic. What was even more pathetic was that Arya, with the excuse that her team would handle her care, had managed to deceive him about a fake pregnancy for 8 months. And he had actually believed her. Ethan hooked his foot under Arya's chin, forcing her to look up. He narrowed his eyes. You caused the death of my beloved. Do you think a simple, I was wrong is enough? You have to pay for her life with your own. It was chestnut season again. Juliet crouched under a chestnut tree, gathering the fallen fruit. A border collie sat beside her, occasionally braving the prickly burrs to nudge a few perfect chestnuts toward her. Juliet rewarded the dog with a pat on the head, then looked down the long, winding path. Finally, just as her basket was nearly full, an SUV appeared at the end of the path, rumbling toward her. The collie had already bounded forward excitedly to greet the car, then trotted back alongside it, leaping into Juliet's arms. With a face full of soft fur, Juliet laughed and gently pushed the dog away, looking up at the man getting out of the vehicle. Leo, you're back. Her eyes were clear and soft, shining with a gentle light. Leo's lips curved into a smile as he gently pulled her into his arms. I'm back. It was so good. His sister wasn't like before, with that perpetual, deep-seated sadness in her eyes. She had amnesia now, but she was happier than she had ever been. He would protect this happiness, no matter what. Juliet was unaware of Leo's thoughts. She only knew that this embrace was lasting longer than usual. As Leo's scent enveloped her, an inexplicable sense of resistance and unease rose from the bottom of her heart. She gently pulled away from his embrace, patting the dog who was frolicking around them to disguise her retreat. Leo didn't notice. He loaded the chestnuts Juliet had gathered into the car and then opened the door for her, his hand carefully shielding her head. The whole way back, he spoke in a soft, low voice, sharing amusing stories from his part-time job that day. Juliet listened silently, but her thoughts drifted with the passing scenery. She had lost her memories. According to Leo, she had been in a car accident on the way to the hospital to give birth. Not only had she lost her memory, but she had also lost the baby. She remembered waking up and Leo had gently comforted her. It's okay, we can have another child. His words were gentle, but Juliet couldn't see any sadness in his eyes for the child they had lost. Chapter 11. To aid her recovery, Leo had brought her to a small town in northern Europe. The environment was beautiful, peaceful, and quiet, perfect for recuperating. Leo worked a part-time job at a supermarket in the city, but he spent the rest of his time with her. In the year they had been here, they had watched sunrises together, chased sunsets together. They had even seen the magnificent aurora borealis dancing in the night sky. Everything was so perfect it felt like a dream. Ever since the casts and bandages from her accident had been removed, Leo would occasionally hug her. But with every embrace, she felt no sense of security or trust, only that strange, inexplicable resistance buried deep inside. The longer she spent with Leo, the more pronounced this feeling became. It made no sense. Leo was thoughtful and gentle, and he treated her like a precious treasure. She didn't understand why she felt this way. After dinner, as Juliet was clearing the dishes, Leo suddenly wrapped his arms around her from behind. Her body stiffened almost imperceptibly, but Leo felt it. He rested his head near her right ear and whispered, "The supermarket is having its anniversary sale tomorrow. I have to dress up as a clown to attract customers. If you're interested, you could come and see." He paused, then moved even closer to her ear, murmuring, "Your injuries are all healed now. When should we try for another baby?" His warm breath sent a shiver down her spine. She pushed him away and fled. "I'll be there tomorrow. I'm going to go wash up now." Leo watched her retreating back, the tenderness in his eyes darkening into a shadow as black as night. She's already forgotten everything. Why won't she accept me? That night, neither of them slept, each lost in their own thoughts. The next day, Leo left for work early. Juliet watched his car disappear down the road. Her hasty retreat last night seemed to have hurt him. He hadn't given her his usual hug before leaving. But Juliet felt a strange sense of relief, which immediately made her freeze. According to Leo, they had known each other for 5 years, were deeply in love, and had never fought. So why was she having these subconscious reactions? Her thoughts were a tangled mess. Juliet grabbed her easel and went to a nearby hill. Being surrounded by trees, wildflowers, and green grass, painting helped her find calm. Although she had amnesia, her muscle memory remained. When she discovered she had a talent for painting, she had asked Leo about it. He had confirmed that she was an art student who made a living from design and illustration work. Before long, an autumn landscape began to unfold on the canvas. As Juliet focused on her painting, she suddenly heard a dull thud behind her. She glanced over her shoulder and saw a man. His deep-set eyes were fixed on her, his face a mask of shock that puzzled her. Still, she offered a kind reminder. "Sir, you dropped your bag." Ethan had no time for his bag. His eyes were only for Juliet. His throat worked, and he finally found his voice. You're alive. Why didn't you come back for me? I've been waiting for you for a year." Juliet tilted her head. "Do you know me? Who are you?" Ethan stared at her expression, a look of disbelief on his face. You have amnesia. I'm Ethan Donovan. I'm the one you love most. Don't punish me like this." A phone rang, shattering the moment. Juliet gave him an apologetic look and answered the call. Leo's voice came through the line. "The event is almost over. Don't forget to come." Juliet realized she had been so engrossed in her painting that she had almost missed her appointment with Leo. "I'm sorry, I'll be right there." After hanging up, Juliet tore off a corner of her drawing paper, quickly scribbled a series of numbers, and handed it to the man, whose face had inexplicably darkened. "I have to go now. This is my number. If you have something you want to say?" "No," Ethan said, not taking the paper, instead picking up his bag. "Wherever you're going, I'll drive you." Chapter 12. The city was much livelier than the town, with the calls of market vendors filling the air. But inside the car, the silence was so thick you could hear a pin drop. Juliet sat in the passenger seat, holding the border collie, her mind replaying the recent events. When he had offered to drive her, she hadn't refused. It was certainly more convenient than borrowing a car from a neighbor. As soon as she got in, Ethan had asked where she was going. "To see Leo Keene," she had answered honestly. She hadn't expected those 2 words to make his face darken like a gathering storm. Juliet remembered what he had said, that he was the one she loved most. But Leo had told her they had been in a loving relationship for 5 years. Who was lying? She wanted to talk to Ethan, to ask him more about her past. But he had shut down the conversation with a curt, "We'll talk when we see Leo." So she could only sit there, petting her dog and pondering. Her gaze traveled from Ethan's hands on the steering wheel up to his stern brow and tightly pressed lips. Ethan and Leo were complete opposites. Leo was gentle and considerate, though a bit obsessive at times. But from the moment she saw Ethan, she knew he was domineering and stubborn, with the arrogance of a man used to being in charge and a barely suppressed madness in his eyes when he looked at her. He concealed it well, but Juliet had sensed it. She felt she had a strangely keen perception of this man's emotions. It was effortless, almost subconscious. Could it be that he was telling the truth? That he was the one she loved most? But then why, when she had stumbled earlier and he had caught her, had a wave of resistance washed over her from the depths of her soul? There was even a faint, trembling fear. It didn't feel like she was facing a lover. It felt like she was sensing danger. They soon arrived at the supermarket where Leo worked. Juliet took the dog to find Leo first, while Ethan went to park the car. Leo was dressed in a clown costume, blowing up balloons for a group of children. When he saw Juliet, he twisted a long balloon in his hands, quickly fashioning it into a rose and tucking it into her arms. "You're here so fast. Just give me a minute, I'm almost done." A circle of little girls looked on with envy, all wanting one too. Juliet watched Leo's fingers fly. A man drove me here," she said. "He said he knows me." Pop. The balloon in Leo's hands burst. He started blowing up a new one. "Who?" "Me." As soon as Ethan's voice rang out, Leo's expression changed. He pulled Juliet behind him. He handed out the few sample balloons to the children, telling them to go play somewhere else. Then he stood in front of Juliet, a protective shield. "You chose Arya. You gave up on her, didn't you? What are you doing here now?" A dangerous smile curved Ethan's lips. I love Juliet. That's because you used deceitful tactics to force us apart. If it weren't for you, Juliet would have come back to me, I would have my child, and we would be a happy family. As for Arya Vance, she is already atoning for her mistakes. She will never get between me and Juliet again. At the mention of Arya Vance, a blurry face flashed in Juliet's mind. She tried to see it clearly, but it slowly morphed into another face, one that was 70% similar to her own, especially the eyes. And you, Ethan continued, his voice dripping with contempt, you kidnapped Juliet for your own selfish reasons, caused her to get hurt and lose her child. And you still have the nerve to stay by her side, deceiving her into thinking you're her lover? Chapter 13. Leo's lips moved, his brow furrowed, but ultimately he said nothing. He had, for his own selfish reasons, orchestrated the kidnapping. He loved Juliet, and he knew how much Juliet loved Ethan. He had only wanted to force Ethan to make a choice, to make Juliet see what a heartless man Ethan truly was. He had arranged for a safety net and a transport team to be hidden at the bottom of the cliff. He had even attached a safety harness to Juliet's back. It was all meant to ensure that after she fell, she would be transferred to a hospital as quickly as possible. But there had been an accident. Due to her pregnancy, Juliet's center of gravity had shifted. Her head had struck a protruding rock and she had lost her memory. He had hurt her. He had no defense. As Juliet listened to Ethan, the face in her mind vanished, replaced by the wrinkled, tiny face of a newborn. A soft cry, and then a pair of hands lifted the baby up. Juliet suddenly grabbed Leo's hand. That's not right. Both men froze. What's not right? Juliet looked up at Leo. The baby. The baby didn't die, right? Leo was stunned, his expression a mixture of complex emotions. You've recovered your memory. Ethan watched Juliet, his face a mask of tension and hope. No, Juliet said, her grip tightening on Leo's arm. But I remember you taking my baby. The chasm between immense joy and crushing disappointment was too much. Ethan's fist slammed into Leo's face. You stole my child. Give him back. Caught off guard, Leo staggered backward, inadvertently pulling Juliet, who was still clinging to his hand, with him. Juliet stumbled, but Leo, quick-witted, managed to steady her just in time. But the hearing aid in her left ear flew out, clattering to the ground at Ethan's feet. What is this? Ha, Leo said, wiping a trickle of blood from his lip. That's a hearing aid. Speaking of which, you didn't know Jules was deaf in her left ear, did you? That day at the hospital, you hit her so hard. She suffered from tinnitus and dizziness for nearly a month. You hurt her, again and again, and you still dare to say you love her. Who's the shameless one here? Ethan opened his mouth to retort, but Juliet had had enough of the pointless arguing. Enough, she cried, biting her lip as she looked pleadingly at Leo. Give me back my child. I don't care which of you is telling the truth. I don't have my old memories, so I can't and won't believe either of you. I live in the now. I just want my child. He's my child. The two men fell silent. He's at a childcare center, Leo finally said, his voice heavy. I'll take you there. Leo started the car, and with Juliet beside him and Ethan squeezed into the back with the border collie, they drove to the facility where he had left the baby. After completing the registration, Juliet saw him. A small child, learning to walk with a teacher. He had grown so much, no longer the wrinkled little old man from her memory. His eyes were dark and bright, his chubby cheeks so smooth and soft you just wanted to pinch them. It was clear he had been well cared for. Juliet let out a small sigh of relief. Leo stood silently beside her. I come once or twice a week to see him, he said, his head bowed, his hands clenched into fists. I hate that he's Ethan Donovan's child, but because of you, I would never harm him. Juliet believed him. When she had registered, she had seen the payment records. He had chosen the most expensive package. Leo had not neglected the child. In fact, given her own fractures and injuries at the time, this facility had probably done a better job of caring for the baby than she ever could have. With the teacher's guidance, Juliet took her son into her arms and whispered a soft, "Thank you" to Leo. Chapter 14. Juliet has to come back with me. The child is mine. You're divorced. What right do you have to make her go back with you? A ringing filled Juliet's ears. The hearing aid that had been knocked out was likely broken, and their arguing voices came through as a distorted electric screech. The world began to spin again. The border collie, who had been happily playing nearby, sensed its owner's distress and came bounding over with a frantic bark. But it was too late. Juliet collapsed to the floor. The baby in the nearby stroller, startled by the commotion, began to wail. Juliet felt as if she were in a dream, a very long one. In the dream, she was starving and cold, wandering the streets, when a pair of gentle hands led her into a magnificent house. The owner of those hands walked with her through bustling streets and quiet alleys, through spring, summer, autumn, and winter. She slowly fell in love with this person, but he was always both gentle and cruel, telling her, "You'll never be as good as Luna. You're not worthy of being compared to her. You're just a substitute. You can be discarded at any time." Denial, ridicule, neglect, suppression, the words pressed down on her, suffocating her. She struggled, wearing Luna's dresses, adorning herself with Luna's favorite jewelry, begging that person to love her. But he raised his hand, and a vase flew through the air. She couldn't dodge in time. A slender, thorny stem pierced her left ear, yet the flower at its tip bloomed beside her head. The man laughed, his voice thick with drink. "Like this, you're actually cuter than Luna." But she could no longer hear. A great terror seized her. If she was flawed, she would be even less of a match for Luna. Would she be thrown out? Would he abandon her? She couldn't let that happen. She had to hide it. So when he sobered up and saw her bandaged ear, he asked what had happened. She smiled. "I just bumped it, that's all." It didn't matter. She was used to pretending, to living her life as a perfect copy of Luna's quiet grace. But one day, that person brought another woman to her. He told her, "I've found a replacement. I don't want you anymore." Juliet plunged into darkness. She struggled in the dark, begging him not to stop loving her, but there was no answer. After what felt like an eternity, Juliet cried herself out. She thought vaguely, "Since he doesn't want me anymore, I don't want to love him anymore either." Light filtered in. Juliet opened her eyes. The familiar scent of disinfectant filled the hospital room. Leo was dozing in a chair, a noticeable stubble on his chin. Ethan sat in a chair next to him, a laptop on his lap, seemingly working. He was the first to notice she was awake. He excitedly pushed the laptop aside and pressed the nurse's call button. "You're awake? How do you feel? Is your head still spinning?" Juliet had never seen such joy and excitement on Ethan's face. He clutched her hand tightly, as if he were holding a long-lost treasure. Shouldn't that look be reserved for Luna? She subtly turned her gaze away. The noise had woken Leo, who now rushed to her bedside. He looked like he hadn't slept in a long time, the bloodshot veins in his eyes making him look 10 years older. "You've been unconscious for 10 days. We took the baby back to the care center. You're not well enough to look after him yet. When you're better, I'll take you to see him." A dull ache still throbbed in her left ear, pulling at the nerves in her head. Juliet knew she was in no condition to care for a child. She nodded, accepting his decision. Seeing her ignore him, Ethan grew annoyed. He squeezed her hand intentionally, trying to make her look at him. She couldn't pull away. Fortunately, a nurse arrived just then and began a basic checkup. Then she delivered a grave piece of news. "You have a brain tumor." Chapter 15. The nurse's words left the three people in the room speechless. What? Ethan and Leo had never imagined this was the reason the doctors had insisted on waiting for the patient to wake up before discussing her condition. Your left ear. The initial injury never healed properly. Many small wounds were not treated correctly. According to our tests, your left ear must have suffered another severe blow about a year ago. The eardrum rupture is much worse, and there are signs of electrical burns in the ear canal from the hearing aid. What's more critical is that the damage to your ear canal has affected your cranial nerves, and a tumor has formed in your brain. After the initial shock, Leo turned to Ethan and punched him so hard his nose immediately started bleeding. "This is all your fault you did this to Jules." Ethan wiped his face, retorting viciously. "It's because you were always hovering around her with that fawning look on your face that I misunderstood if you had just stayed away from her. None of this would have happened." The nurse didn't understand their language, but she knew their argument was disruptive. She warned them that if they didn't stop, she would have them thrown out. They finally fell silent. The nurse asked Juliet, "Can you tell me about when your left ear was first injured?" Before Juliet could speak, Ethan and Leo both interjected. "She has amnesia. She might not remember." "I remember," she said. "She bumped it. It was probably just a small thing. She must not have taken care of it properly, and that's why it got worse." Ethan straightened his clothes after speaking, adopting a concerned expression. I expect you to do everything in your power to treat her. I don't care about the cost, and I can bring in any specialists you need." "No, I remember," Juliet interrupted him. "It was many years ago. You were drunk and threw a vase at me. A flower stem pierced my ear and my eardrum was damaged." She said it so calmly, but Ethan looked at her in disbelief. "Me? How is that possible? When did I?" He looked into her calm, indifferent eyes and suddenly remembered. After he had discovered her ear injury, he had told her, "Don't let it scar or it won't look good." The look in her eyes then was the same as it was now, like she was looking at a complete stranger. A sharp pain pierced Ethan's heart. Leo's fist stopped him from finishing his sentence, and the exasperated nurse finally called security to remove the two brawling men from the hospital. The nurse asked Juliet about her memory. Juliet shook her head. "It's still not fully back, but I can remember bits and pieces." After another series of tests, the nurse suggested Juliet return to her home country. The hospital that had first treated her ear would have her detailed records and could work with specialists to develop the best plan for the brain tumor. "They will have a better understanding of your history, and their treatment plan will be more suitable for you," the nurse explained. After the nurse left, Juliet turned her head to look out the window at the green branches swaying in the sun, her mind drifting. How nice. How quiet. No love, no hate, no emotional entanglements. This was how she was supposed to be living, alone with her child, in peace. But Leo's selfishness had caused her to lose her memory, to live in a world of self-doubt for a year. She had all her memories back now, but she had no intention of letting them know. Let the past be lost along with her memory. She was too tired. She had no energy left to dwell on what had happened. She didn't want to know why Ethan was acting like he was so in love with her now, and she didn't care what had happened to Arya. All she knew was that both men were selfish. Their love was a weight too heavy for her to bear. Chapter 16. When Ethan and Leo were allowed back into the hospital, Juliet was already asleep. They went to ask the nurse if her memory had returned. The nurse said no, but they didn't quite believe her. But she remembered the baby, and she remembered what happened all those years ago. The nurse looked coldly at the two aggressive men. "With all due respect, sir, not only is memory recovery a very long process, but based on the fact that she identified you as the one who injured her ear, I personally think her past memories are probably not very pleasant for her. Even if she can't remember, she can still live in the present." The nurse's blunt words silenced both men. Leo was filled with regret for his deceitful actions. Ethan, on the other hand, silently fumed. Not pleasant. Juliet was the substitute he had raised for 11 years. She had catered to his every whim, suited his every taste. They had spent many wonderful nights together. But he couldn't say that out loud. No rush, he thought. Once Juliet has the treatment, she'll be by my side again. Without Arya in the way, there will be no more obstacles between us. His mind made up, Ethan contacted his assistant, Mr. Phillips, and gave him a few instructions. Juliet's flight back home was scheduled for a week later. Leo, his heart heavy with reluctance, handed the baby to her. "Are you sure you don't want me to go back with you? He's not a good person. Aren't you afraid?" Juliet cooed at the gurgling baby in her arms, gently rocking him. "I'm not afraid," she said, her eyelashes lowered. She hesitated, then decided to say it. "Leo, my memory is back." Her voice was soft, but the words made Leo tremble. "You're a good person, but your methods are a bit extreme. I don't want to hold the kidnapping against you, and I don't want to hold the year of deception against you either. But, in exchange, I want to entrust my son to you." She looked up, her eyes clear and gentle. But Leo felt he could see something else in them, a sadness darker than ink. "I don't know if this tumor can be cured, but I don't want my son to end up in Ethan Donovan's hands. Please, take him and go somewhere he can't find you." The request was solemn and heavy. Leo knew what it meant. It meant Juliet was closing the door on him forever. There was no longer any possibility for them. Leo's heart felt like it had been plunged into ice. But he also knew that even if she hadn't lost her memory by accident, the moment he had committed that act, his chances of winning her over had become nearly impossible. And now he had the memory of a year of quiet life with her. They had felt the warm breeze together, seen the brilliant, blazing sun, planted seeds together in the garden, cooked meals together. A smiling Jules, a daydreaming Jules, a sleeping Jules. He had already carved her image into his heart. What more could he ask for? "Okay, I promise," Leo said, his throat tight as he struggled to agree to her request. He took the baby from her arms. "Once I'm settled, I'll send you the address. But you have to promise me that after your treatment, you'll send postcards to me and the baby." The hospital here could only confirm the tumor's existence, not whether it was benign or malignant. Juliet understood that he was encouraging her to fight, so she nodded gently. "I will." The intelligent border collie seemed to sense her impending departure and circled her feet, whining softly. Ethan, waiting outside in the yard, was growing impatient and called out to her several times. Juliet gave her son one last kiss on the cheek. Goodbye. Chapter 17. The process of returning home and being admitted to the hospital was swift. Thanks to Ethan's wealth and connections, a team of senior specialists convened to examine Juliet. They confirmed the tumor was malignant. The mood in the room was heavy. The doctor who had first treated Juliet's ear injury was devastated. "How did it come to this? I told you to follow up with treatment, to take care of it meticulously. How could this have happened?" The doctor, a man in his 50s, was beside himself with distress. Juliet calmly took the blame. "It was my fault. I didn't follow your instructions back then because of certain things. Please don't be upset, you must take care of your health." Back then, her sole focus had been on being the perfect substitute, on not letting Ethan discover her imperfection. Follow-up treatments would have meant multiple hospital visits, which would have surely aroused his suspicion. She had no choice but to hide it. While waiting for her ear to heal, she had carefully angled her body, using her right ear to listen to Ethan, trying to read his lips. She was terrified of being found out, but it turned out she needn't have worried. Ethan rarely cared whether she responded to him or not. Most of the time, he was just giving her orders. "There's a banquet in a few days. You'll accompany me. I'm going on a business trip for a while. You'll stay home. I bought you a new dress. Wear it for me tonight." She had been the one fighting with herself, forcing herself into a shell named Luna Beaumont. Now, the doctors told her the chances of curing a malignant brain tumor were extremely low. They told her to be psychologically prepared. But she felt strangely light. Her entire life had revolved around Ethan. She had no close friends, no kindred spirits. Even her family was gone, a casualty of Ethan's obsession with his white moonlight. She was like a parasitic vine, clinging to Ethan to survive. And just as she had found the will to break free, she was told she was going to die. It didn't matter. It was just a chance to start over. Her life so far had been nothing but thorns. There had been no roses. Juliet's calm demeanor led the specialists to believe she was strong and optimistic, but she stopped them as they were about to report the results to Ethan. "I have a small favor to ask," Juliet said, her eyes curving into a smile as she looked at the gray-haired old men. "Could you please tell Mr. Donovan that my tumor is benign? I don't want him to worry about me." The old specialists exchanged uneasy glances. "But it's just a white lie, Mr. Donovan. His ability to handle this is lower than mine. If you tell him the truth, he might fall apart even more than I would, and that wouldn't be good for my state of mind, would it? Let him have some hope for now. If it can't be cured, I'll find a way to tell him myself in the end." The patient was insistent, so the specialists had no choice but to compromise. Ethan was ecstatic when he heard the tumor was benign. "So that means, as long as she cooperates with the treatment, she can be fully cured, right?" One of the old doctors corrected him. "There is hope for a full recovery." But Ethan didn't care about the details. All he could think about was that once Juliet was healed, he would remarry her. He had to get a few things to win her over. He instructed his assistant, "Contact the designers at S Brand. Have them rush a new collection, all based on Juliet's preferences. Make sure to pair them with matching jewelry before sending them over." The old specialist left with a heavy heart. He had a strange feeling. Mr. Donovan didn't seem to care about that girl as much as he thought. Before the treatment could begin, Juliet needed a period of physical conditioning. She complained about the smell of disinfectant in the hospital and asked to be discharged, promising to return when the treatment was scheduled to start. Chapter 18. Considering the grim reality of the malignant tumor, the specialists thought this might be her last chance to fulfill any final wishes, so they agreed. They did, however, try to hint to Ethan multiple times, both directly and indirectly, that he should treat her well. Ethan didn't understand. He was annoyed that Juliet refused to go home with him after being discharged. I had the house cleaned. I bought you new dresses and jewelry. Why won't you come back with me? Back, Juliet tilted her head. Even though my memory isn't fully back, I do remember that we got divorced. That house is yours, not mine. What do you mean, come back? Mr. Donovan, you shouldn't lie to me. She still didn't want Ethan to know her memory had returned. It saved her a lot of trouble. She could see that Ethan regretted his actions, but it wasn't because he regretted treating her as a substitute. After all these years, she knew him too well. He had been deceived by Arya, and now he just needed his perfect substitute back in her place. Ethan was fuming. He hated the way Juliet was drawing a line between them. In his mind, their divorce was entirely the result of Arya's scheming and Juliet's temper tantrum. He couldn't stand the fact that she was alive, but no longer revolved around him, no longer loved him with her whole heart. After a moment of internal struggle, Ethan finally managed to convince himself to accept her current attitude, chalking it up to her amnesia. He had also consulted her doctors, who had told him her memory loss was likely due to the tumor pressing on her nerves. Once it was successfully removed, her memory would return. Then he would just have to coax her a bit, and with all he was doing to care for her now, she, who loved him so much, would surely go back to being the way she was. Ultimately, Ethan compromised. He let Juliet move back into the suburban house she had bought during her pregnancy. But he kept a key to the front door, claiming it was in case something happened to her and he couldn't get in. Juliet knew his real intentions, but didn't protest. He had treated her as a substitute for 11 years. For 11 years, she had in turn created for him the perfect dream of a perfect substitute. Now her dream was over. It was time to shatter his. When Juliet woke up the next morning, she found a table laden with steaming hot breakfast. Ethan was sitting at the table, waiting for her. "Morning, I made you breakfast. Come and eat." Juliet walked to the table and looked. Purple sweet potato buns, salted egg yolk buns, soy milk, and a box of pastries that looked dry enough to choke a horse. She tilted her head, a look of confusion on her face. "Mr. Donovan, how many years were we married? Did we eat this every day?" 7 years, Ethan said, not understanding her question. "Yes, you love this stuff. You usually made these things for breakfast." "Oh, is that so?" Juliet's voice was flat. "But I've hated sweets since I was a child. And I would never touch something so sweet and greasy for breakfast. I like noodle soup, dumplings, and savory pancakes. Why, after so many years of marriage, was I forcing myself to eat breakfast I didn't like?" She stared directly at him. "Can you help me solve that puzzle?" From the very first day Juliet had been brought to Ethan's home, she had noticed. Breakfast was always a selection of delicate little sweets. She didn't like them, but as a newcomer, she didn't dare make demands, so she forced them down. It wasn't until she fell in love with him and learned about Luna Beaumont that it all made sense. All these sickeningly sweet pastries were the kind of things Luna loved for breakfast. Chapter 19. Confronted with Juliet's question, Ethan was completely dumbfounded. He didn't think he had ever noticed whether Juliet liked sweets or not. From the moment he noticed her eyes, so much like Luna's, to the day he brought her home, he had just assumed she would share Luna's tastes. Whether it was the type of breakfast or her flavor preferences, Juliet ate whatever he provided. She never raised an objection, nor did she ever express a particular preference. Why was she suddenly saying she didn't like these things today? "You never said you didn't like them before," Ethan said, a hint of frustration in his voice. "Fine, don't eat them. I'll have my assistant bring something else." Juliet knew exactly what he was thinking but didn't object. She went to brush her teeth, made herself a cup of coffee, and waited for the assistant to arrive. She could feel Ethan's eyes on her from the corner of her vision, and she couldn't help but find it amusing. She had indeed played a little trick. Ever since she learned those were Luna's favorites, she had forced herself to pretend to like them. She loved Ethan. What was changing her own tastes for him? But now she was no longer a substitute. She was herself. The assistant arrived quickly, efficiently clearing the table of the cold, delicate pastries. He replaced them with a large, steaming bowl of beef brisket noodles and a plate of leaf-shaped dumplings, along with several small side dishes. The aroma was irresistible. Juliet's eyes curved into a smile. Ignoring the complex expression on Ethan's face, she picked up her chopsticks and began to happily slurp her noodles. The rich, tender beef brisket melted in her mouth, a perfect complement to the springy texture of the dumplings. It was divine. This was the most satisfying meal Juliet had eaten in all her years with Ethan. She didn't forget to feign a question for Ethan. "Aren't you having any? It's delicious." How could Ethan possibly eat this? It was completely different from the dietary habits he had developed with Luna. He could only force out 2 words through gritted teeth, his face a twisted mask. "Not hungry." "What a shame," Juliet said, though she proceeded to devour the entire bowl of noodles. Rubbing her full little belly, she went downstairs for a walk. Ethan watched her leave, a sense of loss more intense than when he had watched her fall from the cliff a year ago washing over him. She was back by his side, so why did she feel further away than ever? Juliet was completely unaware of Ethan's turmoil. Even if she had known, she wouldn't have cared. At that moment, something far more important had captured her attention. "Luna, Luna." At the sound of the name, Juliet whipped her head around. An old woman stood on a balcony above, her body trembling. When she saw Juliet turn, her eyes, filled with tears, locked onto hers. "It really is you, Luna." "Oh, Luna." Before she could cry any further, a younger woman rushed out and apologized to Juliet. "I'm so sorry, my mother-in-law. Her mind isn't well. Please don't pay her any mind." Juliet shook her head. "May I ask, what was your mother-in-law's relationship with Luna?" "My mother-in-law was Miss Luna's nanny." Juliet nodded. What a small world, she thought. She offered the old woman a smile. "Actually, I knew Luna Beaumont too." The old woman's eyes instantly lit up. "You were Miss Luna's friend. Please come in, have a seat. Can you tell me how she's been?" The old woman was incredibly insistent, her hand, like a withered branch, surprisingly strong as she pulled Juliet towards the stairs. The younger woman could only apologize again. Juliet gave her a slight nod to show she didn't mind. Once seated on the sofa, Juliet took the initiative. "Ma'am, could you tell me about you and Luna?" Chapter 20. The old woman, Mrs. Gable, drifted into her memories. Luna Beaumont was a vibrant child. From the day she was born, her parents had cherished her, treating her like a princess. They gave her everything they possibly could, raising her with love and adoration. By the age of 7, Luna was a skilled calligrapher, could perform on stage with world-renowned pianists, speak 6 languages fluently, and was assigned child model for a top magazine. In her social circle, she was the brightest star. But no one knew her secret. Beneath the well-mannered, graceful, princess-like exterior, Luna was deeply unhappy. Like the boys she knew, she loved motorcycles. She dreamed of leaning into sharp turns, of the wind whipping past her. But her parents always said it was too dangerous and forbade her from riding. Luna suppressed her desire for motorcycles until the night before her 18th birthday. Her best friend gave her a motorcycle as a coming-of-age gift. Luna was ecstatic and wanted to try it out that very night. In the dead of night, she slipped out of the house and rode the motorcycle out of the warehouse where her friend had stored it. She had never felt such exhilarating freedom. It was as if the whole world was hers to command. By the time she saw a couple walking in the road ahead, it was too late. The engine roared. She shot past them, and in the violent jolt, she clearly heard the sound of bones breaking. And she saw the crimson splash of blood on her helmet's visor. Perhaps because her friend had given her a high-performance dirt bike, it didn't crash after hitting them. Instead, it continued to roar forward. Luna was terrified. She didn't dare go home. Instead, she went to the house of Ethan Donovan, a boy who had been pursuing her for a long time. Ethan worked through the night, covering her tracks, pulling strings to suppress the news, and reassuring Luna that since she was still one night shy of being an adult, she wouldn't face legal responsibility. Luna hid at Ethan's house for a few days, fraught with fear, but no police ever came to her door. Ethan assured her everything was taken care of and told her to go home so her parents wouldn't get suspicious. Luna returned home, but the weight of what she had done caused her to fall gravely ill. A deep depression took hold of her, and though her parents brought in the world's most famous doctors, no one could ease her tormented mind. Luna gradually lost her vitality, her spirit withering like a rose. Then, one day, when the nanny, Mrs. Gable, opened Luna's bedroom door, the walls were covered in blood like blooming roses. Luna lay beneath the wall of roses, her body crimson, even her lips the color of a rose. She had left only one sentence behind. "I am a sinner. I must atone." Ah, the roses, Luna, the roses, they withered. They withered, the memory shattered Mrs. Gable's fragile psyche. She finally remembered that Luna had been dead for years and buried her face in her hands, sobbing. The younger woman frantically tried to comfort her. Juliet quietly excused herself and slipped away. The truth was close to what she had suspected, but she hadn't imagined the aftermath would be so tragic. Luna had taken her parents' lives, but had paid for it with her own. Ethan had suppressed the news, shielding Luna from legal consequences, but he couldn't shield her from her own conscience. He had lost Luna, only to find Juliet, who had been thrown out of her home by debt collectors after her parents' deaths. It was a truly heartbreaking, twisted fate. Juliet walked halfway around the man-made lake. When she looked up, Ethan was standing a short distance away, waiting for her. She walked up to him and suddenly broke into a brilliant smile. "Mr. Donovan, tell me, what's more tragic, losing the one you love or discovering the one you love never loved you back?" Chapter 21. Her smile blinded Ethan for a moment. Before he could recover, he heard her words, and his heart clenched violently. "What? What do you mean?" Juliet simply smiled, saying nothing. She had always believed that Ethan and Luna had been in love. That's why, after losing Luna, Ethan's love was so great that he needed a substitute to remember her by. But after hearing the nanny's story today, she suddenly realized something. It had been one-sided. Luna Beaumont had never loved him. A star as bright as Luna, she had been adored by everyone since she was a child. She was used to boys fawning over her. If the accident hadn't happened, would Luna have ever given a second thought to Ethan, a boy from a relatively prominent family? As if she didn't see the ugly expression on Ethan's face, Juliet added airily, "Oh, actually, there's something even more pitiful. When the person you love just uses you as a tool. Don't you think?" Juliet's too light, feathery sentences pierced Ethan's heart like daggers. If he didn't know she had amnesia, he would have sworn she knew something about the past and was deliberately taunting him. The thorn that had been stuck in his heart for so many years was the growing realization that when Luna came to him after the accident, it wasn't because she liked or trusted him. It was because she knew his love for her could be used to easily take care of the problem. Ethan had loved Luna, but he also hated her. If she had already used him to clean up her mess, why did she have to end her life in such a gruesome way, leaving him alone to be the bad guy? Unable to answer Juliet's question, Ethan could only flee. As the scenery blurred past his car window, he suddenly remembered her brilliant smile. It was the same face, the same eyes, but he could no longer see a trace of Luna in them. A sense of panic washed over Ethan. Why? Was it his own state of mind, or was it Juliet? The autumn wind rustled, and ginkgo leaves fell, blanketing the road in a golden carpet. The scenery in the suburbs was breathtaking. Juliet set up her easel and began to paint the autumn landscape. Ethan's chauffeured car was parked a short distance away. Ever since he had fled from her that day, he hadn't appeared before her. Not only that, but he had his assistant take back all the new dresses and jewelry he had sent her. Juliet simply assumed it was a lingering effect of the breakfast incident and marveled at Ethan's ability to learn, to finally realize that those things were also part of the substitute package. With the clutter gone from the house, Juliet felt refreshed. She took her daily walks, exercised, finished her design projects, and went out to paint. Life was wonderful. It wasn't until she noticed that, although Ethan hadn't shown his face, a chauffeured car would always be following her from a distance whenever she went out. The feeling of being watched, of being scrutinized, was so palpable it was almost a physical presence. She knew exactly who it was. Juliet didn't mind. You can't just go around swatting at every fly that buzzes near you. She immersed herself in her painting. Only when she was creating was she truly herself. In a way, she was lucky. Luna had started school a year late and had died before she could choose a major in college. So, when it came time for Juliet to choose her own major, Ethan had given her complete freedom. By then, she already knew she was Luna's substitute. She had been determined to choose a field where Luna hadn't shone so brightly. That field was painting. As Juliet lost herself in her world, she had no idea of the turmoil and pain churning inside the man who was watching her. Chapter 22. A quiet week passed. Juliet had almost forgotten about Ethan's existence, until the breakfast on the table was crab roe soup dumplings and Suzhou-style noodle soup, the aroma exceptionally enticing. Juliet didn't hold back. She polished it all off in a few bites and let out a contented burp. Then, she covered her mouth in mock horror. "Oh, I was so full I accidentally burped. Mr. Donovan doesn't think I'm unladylike, does he?" Such a crude act was a deliberate insult to Ethan's image of her as the perfect substitute. Juliet was looking forward to seeing his barely suppressed anger. But to her surprise, Ethan showed no such expression. He was just silent, looking at her with a complex expression. His lips seemed to move. But he was sitting on her left side, and during this period of recovery, Juliet had been following her doctor's orders to gradually reduce the time she wore her hearing aid. Her left ear was now bare, and she couldn't hear what he was saying. Juliet turned her right ear toward him. "What did you say?" "Louder, I can't hear you." Ethan's eyes darkened as he watched her, but he raised his voice. "Do you want to go to the amusement park today? I'll go with you." The amusement park. It was strange to hear those words from Ethan's lips. Juliet had thought he hated that place more than anywhere else in the world. After all, it was on the Ferris wheel there that she had used her own life as a bargaining chip to force the man whose heart was full of Luna to agree to marry her. She still remembered how, after they got off the Ferris wheel, Ethan had turned on his heel and walked away, leaving her there all alone. It was late at night, and Ethan had booked the entire park. The moment he left, the brilliantly lit park went dark, section by section, the blackness swallowing her whole. She stood where the fireworks had just been, watching the last traces of smoke dissipate into the night sky, knowing full well that Ethan was punishing her. The park staff who operated the rides would never have shut everything down without checking the facilities first. They must have been acting on Ethan's orders, giving her a little punishment for daring to pressure him. That day, Juliet had walked for nearly 4 hours in the dark, all the way from the amusement park back home. On the way, several groups of rowdy young men on motorcycles had driven past, catcalling at her. Juliet had even had the morbid thought that maybe, just maybe, Ethan was worried about her, hiding in some corner, watching over her. If she were in danger, would he appear like a prince to save her? But fortunately, a final shred of reason remained in her exhausted and disappointed mind. Ethan was Luna's prince, not hers. Even if she had disappeared on that road, Ethan would not have shed a single tear for her. Later, she arrived home in the faint light of dawn. Ethan was fully dressed and immediately dragged her out the door. "Let's go. You wanted to get married, right? We're going to register today." Juliet didn't know why Ethan wanted to go to the amusement park now, but that didn't stop her from agreeing. All right, whether it was for revenge or humiliation, she was fearless now. But she never expected that this time, on the Ferris wheel, she would be offered the very thing she had craved for 7 years. "Juliet, can we start over?" Ethan held out a ring. It was inlaid with purple gems, forming the shape of an iris. This was the ring she had fallen in love with after they registered their marriage. She had spent a week trying to win his forgiveness, and he had finally agreed to take her to buy a ring. She had spotted this iris ring immediately, but Ethan had impatiently told her to put it down. Irises are cheap, they're not as beautiful as roses. Chapter 23. Juliet flexed her fingers. A rose ring had sat on that finger for 7 years, a brand marking her as a substitute. A year ago, when she decided to leave, she had taken it off and sold it with the rest of the jewelry, abandoning her identity as a substitute at the same time. Juliet wanted to laugh. When she wanted it, when she begged and pleaded for it, Ethan wouldn't spare her a single glance. Now that she no longer wanted it, he was filled with regret, holding it out to her, practically begging her to take it. How disgusting. Belated affection is cheaper than dirt. She tilted her head, her eyes wide with innocence. "Mr. Donovan, you must have bought the wrong one. Irises are cheap. They're not as beautiful as roses. What you've always liked is the rose." Ethan felt as if he had been punched in the gut. His heart ached. Ever since the breakfast incident, he had gradually realized he could no longer see Luna's shadow in her. He had been confused, terrified, and the idea that Juliet would return to him after her recovery seemed increasingly unrealistic. Juliet was no longer the perfect substitute in his memory. Did he still want her? Ethan had spent a week observing her, scrutinizing the Juliet of today. In that 1 week, he had spent more time looking at her, more time seeing her, than in the past 11 years combined. For 11 years, he had seen her only as Luna's substitute, focusing only on the parts of her that resembled Luna and subconsciously ignoring everything else. But this week, he had seen only Juliet. He had truly seen the person, not the replica. He discovered that her every move affected him, the longing and love that stirred in his heart. Some of it, he realized, belonged to Juliet. He wanted to start over with her. He had thought that even with amnesia, her instinct to love him would remain. He had been sure she would agree. He never expected that her old memories would make her attacks so sharp. It seemed he had truly hurt her in the past. Ethan suppressed the bitterness in his heart and forced himself to speak. Roses are beautiful and I used to like them, but irises are elegant and resilient. I like them now. If Ethan had said these words a year ago, before the whole affair with Arya, Juliet would have probably jumped for joy. But after everything that had happened, her ravaged heart couldn't muster a single flicker of happiness. A pale smile touched her lips, her eyes filling with tears. It's too late. It's far too late. The world spun, and when Juliet woke up again, she was lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by the same team of old specialists. Their expressions were grave. My dear, you've been experiencing some significant emotional fluctuations lately. This is not conducive to your recovery. If you want even a sliver of hope, you must try to relax. Juliet nodded. She looked around and seeing that Ethan wasn't there, she spoke. You haven't told Mr. Donovan about my condition, have you? The specialists sighed and shook their heads. Don't worry, we promised you and we'll keep our word. But you must take care of yourself. If you collapse a couple more times, Mr. Donovan will surely figure things out. Juliet thanked the old specialists again. Just as they were leaving, Ethan came in. He was carrying a thermal container, his expression tense. I shouldn't have been so hasty. I should have waited until after your surgery to say those things. Please, don't take it to heart. I made some porridge. Do you want to try some? Juliet looked at his somewhat timid and expectant expression and suddenly blurted out, Did you know that the string for that bracelet? I climbed 3,000 steps, one for each prayer to get it. Chapter 24. The moment the words were out, Juliet regretted them. She pressed a hand to her head, feigning a headache. I'm so dizzy, I think I need to sleep. You should go. Before Ethan could even process the thought as she recovered her memory, a nurse was ushering him out of the room. He thought back to that bracelet. The one that was so crudely woven it was almost ugly. Juliet had presented it to him like a treasure at his company's IPO celebration banquet. In front of all those distinguished, wealthy, and powerful people, Juliet had come running into the banquet hall in a drab tracksuit, shouting his name and holding out the bracelet to him. All eyes had turned to them. Ethan had never felt so humiliated. A wealthy heir, the CEO of a newly public company. And his gift was a coarse, ugly bracelet, presented by a woman who looked so shabby and uncouth. He had felt utterly mortified. He hadn't even heard what she was rambling on about. He had suppressed his anger and impatiently told her to go change, having a servant lead her away. For the rest of the banquet, he had felt that everyone was looking at him strangely, with a mixture of ridicule and disdain. Frustrated, he had gotten blind drunk. When he woke up, Juliet was lying beneath him, her left ear wrapped in a thick bandage. He had reached out to touch it, but then he noticed the ugly bracelet on his wrist. He remembered the unpleasantness of the previous night and had tried to fling it off, but his hand had accidentally hit the bandage. Juliet had woken with a start. What's wrong? He had asked. I just bumped it, Juliet had said, her eyes downcast as she took his hand, her voice almost pleading. Last night you promised you would wear it and never take it off. Don't go back on your word. Although Ethan was still reluctant, a sense of satisfaction spread through him. He knew he had exhausted Juliet the night before. I can just take it off at the office, he had thought. He didn't need to spoil his good mood over something so trivial. That bracelet had lain on his desk ever since, occasionally knocked to the floor by a pile of documents, only to be picked up and put back by his assistant. If Arya hadn't taken it and worn it, he might have forgotten its existence entirely. But did this bracelet really mean that much to Juliet? He was lost in thought. Juliet was thinking about the same thing. When she had burst into the banquet hall with the bracelet, she had been nervous and hopeful, praying that Ethan would see the depth of her feelings. But he hadn't. That's why, seeing the look on Ethan's face as he held the porridge, a look so similar to her own all those years ago, she had blurted out the story of the bracelet. But what was the point of saying it now? Things had changed. People had changed. There was no going back. Juliet didn't dwell on it. She rested until a nurse came for a second checkup, and then she went home. The surgery was less than 2 weeks away. She needed to prepare. Ethan was nowhere to be found, which conveniently allowed Juliet to take care of her affairs. First, she retrieved an envelope from the mailbox. Inside was a single address and a photo of her sleeping son. This was from Leo, keeping his promise. Juliet found an online service that sent letters and gifts on a schedule. Using the money she had saved to pay back Ethan, she paid for 18 years of service up front. By the time she had finished writing all the letters and scheduling all the gifts, it was evening. Juliet did some research online and then made a phone call. "Hello, I'd like to choose a burial plot for myself. Not a joint plot. I want one where I can see a sea of flowers in the spring and be covered in fallen leaves in the autumn." Chapter 25. Another week flew by. Ethan seemed to have become very busy. Juliet only saw him for a brief moment each morning. He seemed to have grown more silent, always watching her as she ate her breakfast. The moment she finished, he would leave in a hurry. Juliet wasn't curious about where he was going or what he was doing. She just thought of him as a sort of magical breakfast-delivering snail. She went about her days at her own pace, handling her affairs. She found time to visit the cemetery. It was on a small hill in the distant suburbs, with a view of a serene green lake, surrounded by lush trees under a vast, open sky. She was very pleased and signed the purchase agreement on the spot. She also entrusted the sale of her current house to an agent, listing it at a low price. A motivated buyer paid a deposit within a few days. As for the platforms and accounts she used for her design work, she updated her profile to on long-term leave and changed her avatar to gray. A few regular clients saw the update and sent friendly messages. Juliet replied to each one, saying she had won the lottery and was retiring. She was met with a chorus of envy and congratulations. After finishing all this, Juliet couldn't help but think that there were advantages to not having friends. She could never have lied to a true friend about something like this, but deceiving people she barely knew. She was surprisingly good at it. Finally, the day came to be admitted to the hospital to prepare for the tumor removal surgery. Ethan didn't show up that morning. Juliet was a little surprised, but it wasn't worth much of her attention. She took a taxi to the hospital herself. The old specialists were ready and waiting for her. During the pre-operative checks and observation, the doctors and nurses constantly tried to reassure her, telling her to relax, that while it would be difficult, there was still hope for success. Juliet wasn't nervous at all. She smiled and nodded, her positive attitude slightly easing the tension of the specialists. "Mr. Donovan didn't come with you?" one of the old doctors asked. "There's something that needs to be signed." "The liability waiver, right?" Juliet said without hesitation, her eyes crinkling into a smile. "We're divorced. I'll sign it myself." The old doctor was a bit taken aback, but at Juliet's insistence, he allowed her to sign the waiver herself. At 2 in the afternoon, the scheduled time for the surgery, Juliet lay on the operating table. The anesthetic injected into her muscles gradually numbed her senses. The bright lights overhead blurred, and she slowly closed her eyes. She didn't see a man, covered in dust, sprinting down the hallway, only to be stopped by the closing doors of the operating room. She didn't see him clutching a crookedly woven bracelet, desperately begging a nurse to take it into the operating room and put it on her wrist. She only felt herself returning to that dark, empty space, a place with no exit, no matter which way she turned. Outside the operating room, Ethan's face was a mask of disappointment. He had rushed through so much work just to have enough time to go and pray for the bracelet, to give it to her before the surgery. He had never imagined the path to obtain the blessed string would be so difficult. The mountain was steep, the steps treacherous. It was a struggle just to climb normally, let alone bowing with every step. He had nearly tumbled down the stairs several times, and in the end, he had to use both his hands and feet to reach the top. Once he had the string, he had to weave the bracelet on the spot. He was clumsy, and it took him a long time to learn, the string becoming frayed from his repeated attempts. How had the small, frail Juliet managed to do it all those years ago? But he was just a moment too late. He hadn't seen her, and the nurse couldn't take the bracelet into the sterile operating room. "It's okay. After the surgery, I'll put it on for Juliet myself," Ethan muttered, trying to reassure himself. Even though I missed the chance before the surgery, Juliet will surely understand my intentions. This time she'll definitely be willing to give me another chance. Before the thought was even complete, a piercing sound came from the operating room behind him. The flat, continuous tone of the heart monitor. Yep, Chapter 26. A cold, continuous rain was falling. Winter had arrived. Ethan sat in the empty house, unable to recall the details of that night. He had only been a few minutes late in his quest for the bracelet. How had that led to him and Juliet being separated forever by death? The old specialists had told him they had informed the patient of the success rate and the malignancy of the tumor. But he hadn't known that Juliet had chosen to hide it from him. He had watched, stunned, as a funeral company he'd never heard of came and took her away. By the time he had chased after them, they had produced Juliet's pre-arranged contract. She had even chosen her own burial plot. Ethan didn't know what he was feeling at that moment, but thinking back on it now, his heart felt as if it were being pounded by a hammer, a dull, throbbing pain. What hurt even more was when, after attending her funeral in a daze, still unable to believe any of it was real, he had gone back to her house, seeking some small comfort, a place to think. A construction crew was tearing down her front door. He had stumbled forward and screamed at them, only to be shown a deed of property transfer. Juliet had sold the house. She had left him nothing. She had arranged everything, announcing her departure to the world, but had kept it a secret from him alone. Ethan threw money at the problem, buying back the house that was already half demolished. He sat up all night, directing the workers to restore the house to how he remembered it. But what good was a perfect restoration? The person who was supposed to be there was gone. Ethan sat in Juliet's house for days. His assistant, Mr. Phillips, searched everywhere for him, finally finding him on the 7th day after her death. "Mr. Donovan, there are some company matters that require your attention." Ethan waved his hand impatiently. "Get out." His voice, raw from days of not eating or drinking, was so hoarse it startled even him. Mr. Phillips had been with Ethan for 15 years. He knew everything about his tangled history with Juliet. He knew all about Luna Beaumont, too. Looking at the broken man before him, Mr. Phillips felt a surge of frustration, fueled by the complaints of other project managers. "Mr. Donovan, with all due respect, there is nothing more useless than cherishing something only after you've lost it. You had so many years to truly see Miss Hawthorne, but because of Miss Beaumont, you neglected her at every turn. You bear a great deal of responsibility for what happened to her. You didn't cherish her then. Who are you putting on this show for now? Miss Hawthorne is gone, but your child is still alive. Are you going to destroy your own health and let her child grow up without a father? You should pull yourself together." Ethan didn't hear the rest of the assistant's words. The single word "child" suddenly injected a surge of life into his dead eyes. That's right, the child. Juliet had left him nothing, but the bond between them, there was still a living, breathing child. Ethan shot to his feet. "Let's go. Find the child." As Mr. Phillips closed the door, he thought he felt a pair of eyes watching him from the empty room. A shiver of fear ran down his spine, and he quickly shut the door tight. The room fell silent. After a moment, a breeze blew in through a window that hadn't been fully closed. It sounded like a long, mournful sigh. Juliet floated in mid-air, looking at her transparent hands. Ethan was after his child. Was this why her soul hadn't dissipated or moved on? After she had faded to black in the operating room, she had woken up like this, a spectral presence bound to Ethan's side. Chapter 27. She watched as Ethan tore apart the bracelet he had prayed for, the one inscribed with "ward off disaster and illness." She watched as he chased down the funeral procession, only to flee into the house she had sold. She watched as he bought back the house for a price several times its market value, then sat motionless in the spot where she had loved to sit. He was like a bullied child, seeking refuge in a place that could no longer offer him protection. He sat there for 7 days. Juliet watched him for 7 days. He was gaunt and lifeless. Juliet, surprisingly, found it all rather dull. She had had her own moments of sitting alone in an empty house filled with despair. Every year on Luna's birthday, when Ethan would use work as an excuse to go visit her grave. The days he had claimed to be on business trips while he was actually with Arya. She had experienced it all many times. What did it matter if Ethan was now experiencing it once? Although Juliet couldn't keep up with Ethan's physical movements, it was as if an invisible force bound her soul to him. If she drifted more than 50 meters away, she would be automatically pulled back to his side. Because of this, she hadn't even had the chance to see her own funeral. Ethan was a man of action. He immediately returned to his company, dealt with a few urgent projects, and then tried to charter a private jet to Northern Europe. But his assistant stopped him. "Mr. Donovan, today is the 7th day since Miss Hawthorne's passing. Aren't you going to leave some flowers for her?" And so, Juliet saw her own gravestone. It was a flat marker set into the ground. There was no photo of her, no name, only a small, blooming iris. This was her own request. The iris was her favorite flower and the signature she left on all her design work. The bouquet of white chrysanthemums in Ethan's hand was crushed. He knelt before the iris and gave a bitter laugh. Then he ordered his assistant, "Go and buy irises." The cemetery was large. After the assistant left, Ethan was alone. He couldn't see Juliet, who was drifting around, admiring the beautiful scenery. He could only hear the wind whistling through the trees, a sharp, mournful sound. He leaned against her gravestone, and in the profound silence, he let out a soft laugh. "This is nice. The view is good. You chose a good place for yourself. Did you know," he began, "that Arya and I got together because of you? One of your designs was sold and used for the set of her movie. When I went to discuss investing, I saw her standing in the middle of the stage." Juliet rolled her eyes. To talk about his love affair with another woman at her grave, how disgusting. "At that time, you were the perfect substitute for Luna. You satisfied me in every way, but you were too obedient. It felt wrong. Luna wasn't supposed to be that obedient, that submissive. She wasn't supposed to love me with her whole heart. She was a rose, dazzlingly beautiful, but if you tried to pick her, you'd get a handful of thorns. So I found Arya. She'd been in the entertainment industry for years. She had her own schemes. She had a bit more of a rebellious streak than you." Juliet was so disgusted she wanted to cover her ears, but Ethan's tone suddenly shifted. "But she shouldn't have deliberately exposed our relationship. And she especially shouldn't have faked a pregnancy to force me to divorce you. Arya was just a minor actress, nothing to worry about. But at that time, she was involved with another powerful man, someone I was about to close a major deal with. That man doted on her, but he was old and easily swayed by pillow talk. I couldn't lose that project, so I had to wrong you for a little while and agree to the divorce. But the child was fake." Ethan's voice suddenly turned cold. "Since Arya loves being a mother so much, I sent her to a place where she can be pregnant forever. I'll make sure she can always have a real child. That's the price she pays for hurting you." Chapter 28. If she weren't a soul, Juliet would have been covered in goosebumps. She had always known Ethan was ruthless, but to so grandly pin the reasons for his cruelty on her was still deeply unsettling. Fortunately, the assistant returned with the flowers. Ethan said no more, arranging the purple irises in front of her grave. "Wait for me," he whispered. "When my time comes, I want to be buried with you." Juliet let out a cold laugh. Tormenting her in life wasn't enough. He wanted to disturb her peace in death too. Fortunately, when she had chosen the cemetery, she had made sure to ask. All the neighboring plots were taken, and joint burials were not allowed. At least for the 100 years of management fees she had paid up front, Ethan could forget about it. Ethan went to the airport and, after a dozen hours, arrived in the small town where Leo had lived with the amnesiac Juliet. But the small house with its carefully tended garden was now overgrown with weeds. Wild vines crawled up the windows and roof. It was clear no one had lived there for a long time. His only hope, his last lifeline, crumbled before his eyes. Ethan, like a madman, broke down the locked gate and rushed inside, searching every room. He screamed Leo's name. Gradually, the calls turned to curses, his angry shouts making even the neighbors, who didn't understand the language, frown in disapproval. They told Ethan that the sunny, handsome young man had left with a baby 3 months ago. "Where did they go?" Ethan asked frantically. "I don't know," a neighbor said with a shrug. "I asked him, but his answer was strange." "What did he say?" The neighbor thought for a moment. "He said, 'I'm going to fulfill a promise to the one I love most.' The one he loves most." Ethan murmured to himself. "Juliet?" He let out 2 grief-stricken laughs, and then, like a madman, broke down and sobbed. "Juliet, How could you be so cruel you let Leo take my child away? Juliet floated in the air, watching him coldly. She didn't want her child to have a father like Ethan. Selfish, cowardly, always making himself the center of everything, always blaming others for his own mistakes. Just like now, he was cursing her, cursing Leo, but never himself. It never occurred to him that he was the problem. Ethan truly felt the sting of being abandoned, of being despised. Leo had left with the child 3 months ago. That meant he and Juliet had made their pact before she left. From that moment on, Juliet had severed his last hope. Looking at the cozy little house before him, Ethan finally found an outlet for his rage. He grabbed a sledgehammer and began to smash everything in sight. He destroyed the flowers Juliet had planted with her own hands, the swing Leo had built for her. In a matter of moments, the neglected little yard was completely destroyed. Ethan, exhausted, took 2 steps and began to laugh. Juliet truly thought he had gone mad. His eyes red, Ethan turned and ordered his assistant, "Find them. Search the entire globe if you have to, but find Leo and my child." The assistant could only agree. Ethan dropped the sledgehammer and turned to leave, but at that moment, he stepped on a piece of the broken swing. Ethan stumbled, lost his footing, and fell to the ground. By the time the assistant rushed to help him up, Ethan was staring blankly, his hand covering his left ear. Bright red blood trickled through his fingers. The assistant was terrified and ran to the neighbors for help. Ethan sat in the ruins, looking at the blood on his palm, feeling the sharp pain in his left ear and the sudden muffling of the world's sounds. He murmured, "So this is how much it hurts." Ethan's injury didn't stop the search for Leo and the child. In fact, it intensified it. But Leo was well hidden. Despite all of Ethan's resources, after more than a year, there was no trace of them. "Juliet, you really are cruel," Ethan said, leaning against her gravestone, empty wine bottles scattered around him. "I was starting to love you. Did you really hate me that much?" For a year, Juliet had watched Ethan work during the day, a rigid, robotic machine, and then retreat to her house at night, drinking himself into a stupor. She never felt a single shred of pity for him. This was all the result of his own actions. He deserved to face the consequences. Perhaps because Leo and the child were so well hidden and no longer needed her protection, Juliet felt her soul growing fainter, as if it were about to dissipate. But one day, Ethan's assistant brought him a phone. "This is Leo's number. He knows we're looking for him. He wants you to call him." Ethan shot up from his drunken stupor, his eyes bloodshot as he dialed the number. "Leo, where did you take my son?" "That's not important," Leo's voice was calm. "This is a burner phone. You'll never find us. I'm calling to tell you to stop harassing Jules and the child. Even a dog wouldn't want your love. Don't think you're some kind of saint for giving Jules a home. Her home was destroyed by you and your precious white moonlight." With that, Leo hung up. Ethan, stunned, stared blankly at his assistant. What? What did he mean? The assistant pushed up his glasses, his voice cold. "Miss Beaumont was responsible for the hit and run that killed Miss Hawthorne's parents. I told you this before, but you didn't seem to be listening." Ethan slid to the floor, his eyes vacant. No wonder she couldn't forgive me. No wonder." The assistant took a small box from his bag and handed it to Ethan. "This came in the mail this morning. The sender is Miss Hawthorne." Ethan's eyes lit up. He never thought Juliet would have left something for him. With trembling hands, he tore it open. Inside, glittering under the light, was a diamond hair ornament. It was the coming-of-age gift he had given to Luna. The color drained from Ethan's face. He seemed to age 10 years in an instant. He dropped the ornament, grabbed a bottle of wine, and began to chug it, as if trying to drink himself to death. The assistant left without a word, the resignation letter in his bag already filled out. Juliet floated in the air, her form slowly fading. "Ethan, you don't deserve forgiveness or redemption. You should live out the rest of your life in pain and regret."